All right, so we're recording now. Hang on, my kids are getting on to Messenger Kids, and my phone will just be dinging off the hook here.
I know how that is.
Yep, so chapter 24 really is identifying this thing called decentralized operations. All right. Decentralized operations is basically looking at an organization to the typical corporate ladder that you guys are probably familiar with. All right, a decentralized organization starts with your CEO at the top, all right, and under him, you know, he's going to have a bunch of VPs, all right, VP of marketing, VP of I have no idea, and VP I really don't care, all right. Then over here, we're going to have, all right, and the CFO, which is the Chief Financial Officer. He is at the level, even though I made his stick a little longer, all right, he is at the level of a VP. So just for your understanding. So CEO, again, if you're unfamiliar, is Chief Executive Officer. Sometimes they're also called the president, all right, the president of an organization. All right, and so a normal corporate ladder basically, you know, has deviations, all right, and so we have the controller, okay. The controller really, when we're talking about financial accounting, and, you know, a lot of times he's kind of the chief accountant, right? But if you have a large enough organization, you also have a treasurer. And the treasurer, their responsibility is, you know, dealing a lot with cash, making sure that you have sufficient financing. You know, so we kind of briefly talked about this when we talked about, you know, the chapter on investing, all right? Because they'd be responsible for making all the investments and whatnot. Okay, so under your controller, then, you know, he has his minions. Okay, so, you know, maybe you have a AP manager, accounts payable, AR manager, accounts receivable, you know, fixed assets, you know, and then payroll. Okay, and then underneath these guys, you know, they have their people, okay, and they have potentially their people like this. All right, and so, you know, this is the corporate ladder, and they talk about the benefits of a decentralized organization. Some of them is the fact that, you know, you can see that you have upward mobility. All right, you know, so you might start off down here, okay, and, you know, as you gain experience, you know, you'd move up to here and then move up to here. Okay, at this point, you're probably going to do a couple other things. All right, getting experience, and then maybe moving up here. Maybe there's an assistant controller. All right, you know, and then, you know, the controller, and then the CFO, and then, oh, okay, that about 80%, okay, of CEOs, or the chief executive officer, the big dog, the chief, all right, the commander in chief, whatever, 80% of those people come from an accounting or a finance background, all right? And so, you know, if you guys do choose, again, yes, I am fishing, all right? You guys do choose accounting, all right? You know, that can lead, all right, you know, to being the top manager of an organization, all right? And so that's an example of decentralized organization. The problem with that, okay, and there's several problems, you can read most of them, is that, you know, the biggest problem is that somebody down here, okay, someone at this lower level, they may make decisions that negatively affect the organization as a whole. All right, you know, they make a mistake, or you know, they because they're trying to get their bonus or something, you know, they do something you know, unscrupulous, or, you know, whatever. The other deal is that there could be duplication of jobs or divisions. All right, and so I talk more about that in the video. A centralized organization basically starts with the the CEO, okay, and everybody reports to the CEO, even though it does look like a coronavirus. um, you know, uh, you know, this happens a lot of times when you have an entrepreneur that's unwilling to let go of his organization. He micromanages, so for anybody to make a decision, they have to ask the CEO. So you may even have little guys here, that are, you know, everything has to flow through the CEO. Okay, that's just super inefficient. Okay, and really prohibits the organization from growth. All right, because if you're this guy, right, let's say you're this guy, and you're like, "Ooh, I want to advance in my organization." Well, where are you going to go? All right, the CEO has got to die or retire. So it's it just promotes murder because this guy's got to kill this guy before he gets his job. Yeah, joking. All right, but yeah, I should maybe not record these things. But you know, there's a lot of weaknesses that go into this. Something that's kind of interesting, and it's not necessarily this bad, all right. But again, our good old friend Mark Zuckerberg, all right. Um, the Facebook as a corporation actually took a hit when they went public, as far as their stock price, because Mark did not step aside and let somebody else be the CEO. Now, a lot of people would say, "Oh, he's done a good job," all right? But really, we don't know because it, Facebook could be better or more financially stable if they actually got a professional manager in there. Okay, you know, Mark Zuckerberg, learned a lot on his climb, but the organization took a hit from the stock market, from investors, because he did not step down. And so just kind of interesting. And so the book goes into talking about decentralized, um, uh, the decentralized organization, and then it gets into talking about responsibility centers. All right, a responsibility center. There are three responsibility centers, and obviously, okay, you're with a responsibility. You're responsible for that specific thing. All right, and so the first one, okay, is a cost center. Guess what they're responsible for? Yes, costs. Okay. The second one is a profit center. Guess what they're responsible for? They're responsible for revenues and costs. And then there's the investment center. They're responsible for revenues, costs, and investments. Let me see, fixed. Fixed asset investments, all right? And so again, the video, I go into a lot more depth on that, okay? Um, but yeah, you guys can spend time looking at that. For the most part, they show that, generally the lower level people down here, okay, they're not necessarily responsible for, revenues. They're just responsible for the costs that they're responsible for. As you move up, okay, you're probably going to have, Salesforce over here. Okay. They're obviously responsible for the revenues. Okay. So somebody, mid-level actually would be responsible for a profit center. Whereas top management, they're more responsible for the investments. Okay, so yes, they're responsible for revenues, costs, all right, but really, plant expansion, moving into new markets, those sort of things are more the investment center level. And so, they go and they talk about, there's really not much here in your text. And again, you can read about that. Where we get into the profit center, all right, there we talk about, okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to start with a profit center. Okay, they get in there and they talk about departmental service charges, all right? And I'm trying to see a problem that I think is similar to the one on your multiple choice questions. All right, well, I'll make my own up. All right. If we had income before departmental service charges, whew, didn't give myself enough room. Okay. If we had income before, let's just say it was $1 million. Okay. And ended up with net income of say 800,000. Okay. Can anybody guess what this is? Seeing you're all muted, you're probably just talking to the computer, because I know you're all answering and you're saying, well, hey, if this is income before departmental service charges, I bet this is departmental service charges. I guess I could use an H there, huh? Okay. Can anybody figure out what the departmental service charges are? Maybe it's 200,000. All right. And so, I think on the final exam and maybe even on your quiz, you have a question that's like this. I think they even just say, hey, maybe they give you this number and you got to figure out this number. Or, they give you, like I did, they gave you this number and this number, you got to figure out, the 200,000. All right. But it's pretty much that easy. All right, as far as that multiple choice. Okay. That's really, the problem as it relates to the profit center. Okay. When we talk about the investment center, okay, and like I said, there's a lot more content on the video. All right, with the investment center, the problems related to that, all right, outside of just your understanding of an investment center, is this concept called return on investment. All right, return on investment, okay, and again, we go into a lot more detail of this. All right, consists of your profit margin, okay, and your investment turnover. Okay, so your investment turnover. And so the profit margin, the equation for the profit margin is going to be income from operations, okay, divided by sales. Whereas our investment turnover, okay, is sales divided by invested assets. Okay, and so you guys probably are familiar with the term return on investment. Because if you're saying, hey, if I put $500 into my bank account, okay, what kind of return am I going to get on that investment? Well, that's usually the interest, right? Okay. Or if you invest into a share of stock, okay, you spent $25 for that share of stock, and at the end of the year, you could sell that for $35. Okay, so your return on that investment of 25, all right, is $10, right? But when we have a corporation, all right. By the way, this expansion, all right, is called the DuPont formula. Right? The DuPont formula. Okay, because there is a shorter version of the equation return on investment. If you know anything about fractions, which I don't, I hate fractions. Whenever you're multiplying two fractions, if you have one that has the same denominator as another that has a numerator, right? Those things cancel each other out, don't they? Okay. And the normal equation for return on investment, okay, is income from operations divided by invested assets. Okay. But the DuPont Corporation, when they were looking for investments, they said, hey, let's break these things into two different parts. Let's break it into a profit margin, okay? Basically saying, hey, if we had a dollar in sales, how much income from operations could we earn? They also looked at it, okay, under the investment turnover, okay, which basically says if we had $1 of investment in our organization, whether that's equipment or inventory or whatever it may be, okay, how many sales dollars could we generate? And by looking at these two different components, when they consolidated, all right, with other, because DuPont is what's referred to as a conglomerate, they buy different companies that are even in different industries. DuPont, which by the way, started, I believe, in Michigan, somewhere in Midland, I think, and they were a chemical company, but now they're much more than that. All right, they have investments in all different things, and so you should be able to answer questions related to, excuse me, the profit margin, investment turnover, and return on investment. All right, and so if you want to, let's work a problem. And again, you're going to have to do this on the exam. All right, PE 24-4A. All right, and basically here we have, if you have your book, it's 1198, page 1198. It says cash company has income from operations. All right, so we have income. Let me change my pencil. Income from operations. Okay, of 112,500. Okay, we have invested assets of 750,000, and we had sales of 1,875,000. Okay, and so from this information, all right, you're going to be asked one of three things. All right, so I think there's multiple questions on this, and again, they are multiple choice format. And so under the DuPont formula, okay, we're first of all going to calculate the profit margin. All right, so your return on investment. Okay, And we're basically, all we're doing is we're using, this equation here, because this is going to give us the three things. It's going to give us the profit margin, the turnover, right, and the return on investments. Right? And so if we're looking at the profit margin, okay, we're going to take income from operations. So in this case, we had 11250. And we're going to divide that by sales, 1,875,000. And we're going to multiply that. That's our profit margin. Okay. And we're going to divide that by, or multiply that times the asset turnover ratio or investment turnover ratio. And we're going to take the sales, 1,875,000, and we're going to divide that by our invested assets of 750. Okay. And so, get my calculator, 11250 divided by 1,875,000. So this comes out to be 0.06, and we're going to multiply that times 2.5. And so just so you know what this is telling us, all right, so the profit margin, basically says for every dollar in sales we had, we were able to generate 6 cents, right, in income from operations. Whereas over here, this says for every dollar in invested assets that we have, we're able to generate $2.05 in sales. Okay. And so really what this speaks to, all right, is efficiency. How efficient are you at using your assets to generate sales? Once you got those sales, how effective are you at converting that sales dollar into profit? Okay. And so we can compare these things, right, to other organizations or businesses with, or I should say other divisions. And that's what we do in that video. We have the central, the northern, and the southern divisions, all right? And we utilize return on investment in order to identify which ones are the best, all right? And so to get our return on investment, all we need to do is take, this 2.5 and we multiply that times 0.06, and we end up with 15%. And so is that good? Well, you really don't know. You don't know unless you compare it to something else, right? I would say, currently your returns, all right, on your investments in the stock market, okay, 15% would be great. But that's, you need it to compare it to something else. I do at this point want you to know that starting on page 1187, where it talks about the balance scorecard, to the end of the chapter, we don't cover any of that material. I mean, it's a good read. You can read about that. But that's not going to be on the quiz, and it's not going to be on the exam. Again, in your preparation, or even if you're trying to do your homework, using the illustrated problem at the end of each chapter can help you learn how to do any calculation that they ask you. Outside of that, that's all I really have for chapter 2024, unless you guys have any questions. Let me get my camera going again. Let me set you up.